Hello, everyone, and welcome tonight. It is Sunday night, August the 10th, 2025. I'm Glenn Rawson. Thank you for being with me. Thank you for joining me. I just wanted to give you a quick review. I came home yesterday from the Mormon Battalion tour. What we did was, well, it was a lot of fun. We retraced the steps of the battalion in going in backward order. We went from Salt Lake into the gold fields of California and then down to Los Angeles and Fort Moore that the battalion built. And then from Fort Moore down to San Diego, to the visitor center down there, to Old Town, to Presidio Hill where the monuments are at. We also went out on the Anza Borrego Desert where the battalion actually marched in from in January of 1847. We had 9 people on the tour. And we had so much fun. Oh, what a wonderful, wonderful group of people they were. So patient. It was a lot of driving, but we got to see some really cool things. And then we left yesterday and came on up I-15. And as we went, I taught battalion history in a lot of the settlements as we came up Interstate 15. That whole area, the whole Mormon corridor from here to San Diego, is rich with battalion and early Latter-day Saint history. So we came in yesterday, and now I'm taking off again Monday morning, and I'll be in England or the British Isles for a month. So just letting you know that, this is my heavy season for travel. I am going to be gone, and my next several firesides are going to come from abroad. Like I said, we leave Monday morning. We don't get back till the 8th of September. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Now, there is a tour coming up. I just wanted to let you know about it. In September, it's the one I've been telling you about. It's the Temples and Tabernacles of Utah. It's going to be a tour where we're going to teach the history and do temple sessions in Logan, in Manti, St. George, and then the Provo City Center Temple, which was once a tabernacle. We're going to talk about the history of each of those places, tell the stories, and do sessions in each of them. That tour still has some seats. Now, if you would like to go, call Dennis at 801-541-9760. That's Dennis. You're going to get a real person, not a machine. And trust me, he is a real person. 801-541-9760. And he can give you the information that you're looking for. All right. So I asked for your prayers tonight. And as I considered what I wanted to do for a fireside, my group and we had a discussion on the way back about the history of the Mormon Battalion. It's a chapter in our story of early Latter-day Saint history that, well, not very many people don't know that much about it, as evidenced by the fact that really no one wanted to go on the tour. But it's a critical chapter of the pioneering history of the Latter-day Saints. The good that the battalion did. I mean, President Brigham Young declaring that, and I'll talk about this later in the fireside, that the battalion was, quote, the salvation of this church. It's an amazing story, and it embodies everything that we as Latter-day Saints hold dear: covenants, obedience, sacrifice, consecration. It's all there. And so tonight, I thought I would just take you back through glimpses of the battalion. This is some of the material that I shared with my group over the course of the last 8 days. Okay. The first story begins with the call of the battalion. The battalion was called out to service in June and July of 1846. There on the banks of the Missouri River and across Iowa Territory. And sometimes that call came at the last moment. In 1878, one of the wives of a battalion member, Margaret Phelps, who at the time was the wife of Alva Phelps, Well, in 1878, she recounted to Daniel Tyler those hours in July 1846 when the call to serve in the Mormon Battalion came. She said, quote, "We were traveling along the way when the call came for my husband to leave us. Remember, they were en route to the Salt Lake Valley. It was midnight when we were awakened from our slumbers with the painful news that we were to be left homeless and without a protector. I was very ill at the time. My children were not well. My babe was also extremely sick, but the call was pressing. There was no time for any provisions to be made for wife or children. No time for tears. Regret was unavailing. He started in the morning. I watched him from my wagon bed till his loved form was lost in the distance. It was my last sight of him. 2 months from the day of his enlistment, the sad news of my bereavement arrived." End of quote. On the 20th of July, Alva had marched off with the battalion to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. While in Fort Leavenworth, he got sick. When the battalion left the fort on August 12th, Alva was still sick, but he kept going. Then, while camped on the Arkansas River, Henry Standage, a fellow battalion soldier, wrote the following in his journal. Wednesday, September 16th, 1846. Brother Alva Phelps died this evening. I believe that calomel killed him, as he was a faithful brother, and he had not been sick but a little. I helped dig his grave by torchlight. After I returned from digging Brother Phelps's grave and had laid down in my tent, some of the battalion called me to look at a star in the east that continued to move both north and south, up and down. It was directly in the course that we had traveled. When he was taken sick, he pleaded against his being forced to take calomel and said he would get well without it. End of quote. The calomel was the medicine. Actually, it was a toxic poison that was being administered by the battalion doctor. And it cost many of the men, some their lives. Though this seems, as it were, a sad tale to relate, it is the choice that Margaret made after Alva's death that makes this story entirely worth listening to. So utterly astonishing. She relates, quote, "The blow," meaning the news of his death, "the blow entirely prostrated me. But I had just embarked on the sea of my troubles. Winter found me bedridden, destitute, in a wretched hovel which was built upon a hillside. The season was one of constant rain. The situation of the hovel and its openness gave free access to piercing winds and water as they flowed over the dirt floor, converting it to mud 2 or 3 inches deep. No wood but what my little ones picked up around the fences, so green that it filled the house with smoke. The rain dripping and wetting the bed, which I was powerless to leave," she said. "No relatives to cheer and comfort me, a stranger away from all who ever loved me. My neighbors could do but little, their own troubles and destitution engrossing their time. My little daughter of 7 was my only help. No eye to witness my suffering, but the pitying one of God. He did not desert me. How we made it through, I don't know, but somehow we did, and we found our way to the Rocky Mountains in the West, finally." End of quote. She kept going. She kept going, kept the faith, honored her covenants. It's stories like that from the battalion, although sometimes they're hard to hear, that make us realize that no matter what we're going through, just keep going. Don't give up. Second story. When you go to the battalion center in San Diego, they have the talking picture screens and actors that portray and tell the story of the Mormon Battalion. And one of the humorous stories in the calling of the battalion was a little boy named Charles Edwin Colton. Charlie, as it turns out, when his dad mustered into service with the battalion and marched off to Fort Leavenworth, Charlie waited around for a while and then took off after his dad, caught up with his dad, was allowed to join the battalion as an officer's servant, and he marched all the way to San Diego and back. He was only 11 years old. Well, this story is about Charlie's parents, Philander and Polly Colton. It is, as it were, a love story. Polly Colton was a beautiful brunette with large brown eyes. Polly Matilda Merrill, her maiden name, was considered the prettiest girl in town and often the center of attention. The men flocked around her. Rather small in stature, beautiful, she caught the attention of Philander Colton. Now, it was common talk among the boys of the town that no boy could kiss Polly Merrill. But Philander accepted the challenge at a country party. He walked up to her, grabbed Polly by the shoulders, and planted a big kiss on her cheek. Angrily, she slapped him. Philander was unrepentant, and he said to her, "I told the fellows I would, and I shall do, many other times in the future." Oh, that's a lot of brass. Well, Philander made good his promise. They got married in 1833. Several years later, they joined the church, and eventually they arrived in Council Bluffs. And of course, Philander volunteered to march with the Mormon Battalion, leaving behind his wife, Polly, with 4 young children. And then, as I told you, the oldest of those children ran off with his dad to join the Mormon Battalion, Charles Edwin. And can you imagine what that would have been like for the mother? Well, after the service of the battalion was over and after his release, Philander and Edwin, Charlie, marched back and found the family at Christmas time in Iowa. I can imagine that was a very special holiday for all of them. From there, the Colton family came on to Salt Lake Valley, where they spent many happy years together. Philander worked as a brick mason and a plasterer, which skills he had used in California. Polly cared for their household, now 11 children. On August 13th, 1891, at the age of 73, Polly passed away. But even her passing was marked by romance. While she was bedridden, the family came and told Philander that she was dying, and he responded firmly, "No, she won't leave me. When we were married, she promised to stay with me, and she has never broken a promise yet." Well, Polly passed away. Philander instructed his family, quote, "Don't bury her until I die. When you hear a loud clap of thunder, I'll pass away also." As recorded in the local newspaper, 2 days later, August 15th, in the midst of a cloudless sky, a loud clap of thunder sounded, and Philander closed his eyes in death. United in life, they were united in death. Philander and Polly Colton. Next story. Upon hearing President Brigham Young call for volunteers to join the Mormon Battalion, June July, 1846, Henry Green Boyle determined that he would enlist. So he wrote, quote, "We were mustered into service the 16th of July, 1846. We were now on our line of march from Council Bluffs to Fort Leavenworth. Henry continued that march with the battalion into New Mexico and across Arizona. On December 18th, 1846, Henry wrote the following: This morning at 4 o'clock, my nose commenced to bleed and did not stop for 7 hours. We took up our line of march and traveled 6 miles to Tucson Creek, and there we watered our animals and filled our canteens for the desert. Except my messmate unfortunately lost my canteen, and thus I had to start across the desert and traveled 30 miles. The next day we continued our march at sunrise, finding no water all that day. I traveled nearly all that night, having been left some distance behind. I was weak from loss of blood, from hunger and thirst, and from the fatigues of our long journey. None but ourselves will ever know how much we suffered." That's something that we moderns need to know about the battalion. None but ourselves will ever know how much we suffered. And all that for the sake of obedience and faith. When traveling, I became so weak and exhausted that I lay down by the side of the trail to rest and soon went to sleep. I dreamed of being helped to 3 cups of water from a hole by the side of the trail. I woke up, then went to sleep and dreamed the same thing over again. And when I got up to pursue my journey again, I thought my thirst caused me to dream of water. But the dream made such an impression on my mind, I could not avoid watching that side of the road. Sure enough, I saw a man in the act of dipping up water with a cup. I approached him, and he dipped up and passed 3 cups of water to me from a hole on the right side of the road, just precisely as I had dreamed. I did not speak to the man, nor him to me. I thought he was a stranger, as I did not remember ever having seen him before. For it seemed to me I could see him very plain with all his features and impression of countenance, although it was dark and no moon, it being about 1 o'clock in the morning of the 20th. I did not think the circumstances were strange at the time it was occurring, but I've been thinking about it all day, and the more I think it, the more I marvel. When I arrived at the camp, I was not thirsty. End of quote. The Lord once said, "I will go before your face. I will be on your right hand and on your left, and my spirit shall be in your hearts, and mine angels round about you to bear you up." Doctrine and Covenants 84-88. And so he is. Okay, my friends, let's take a break. How are you? You know, these tours, I think about you a lot, and I wish I could bring every one of you. I told my group, I wish I could tell everyone this story about the battalion and show you where it happened. It is such a faith-promoting and inspiring experience. I can't, and some of you can't afford to go, and I get that, but it doesn't mean I don't think of you. Let me show you something here. It's been sitting here over my shoulder. This is the new Fun for Less catalog that just came out. Has some of the tours for the first 6 months of next year. And if you're not on the mailing list, you should get a copy of this. It is beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. There's one of the tours I'll be taking later on this year. Now, this is next year's tours, but this is the Danube River on beautiful. And also the American Heritage 250 tour that's coming up. That's in here. Anyway, guys, that's the catalog for Fun for Less for next year. It's gorgeous. If you haven't seen it, you should get one. You can give them a call at their offices, Fun for Less Tours in Draper. I just wanted to let you know a couple of my tours I'm going to do next year with Fun for Less. I'll be doing church history, the first chapter of church history from Palmyra to Nauvoo. That's chapter 1. You can come with me on that one next May and June. Then again, I'll be going back to the British Isles, England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales next August. So if you've ever wanted to visit that, check out funforlesstours.com and they will give you any information that you need. Or again, just give them a call. There are real people that answer the phone, not machines. funforlesstours.com or Fun for Less Tours in Draper, Utah. Give them a call. Tell them I sent you. And one other thing, I don't have a copy of it yet to show you, but the new book that I've been talking about, Prayer Brings Miracles, the anthology, the collection of stories about the power and miracles of prayer, that book is almost here. If you would like a copy of that pre-ordered, you can go to glennrawsonstories.com. It's there and it's available. Okay, more that I could say, but let's get back to the battalion. The Mormon Battalion was discharged from service in July of 1847 in Los Angeles. Immediately after, the men split into three primary groups. One group going up towards Monterey. Another group with Levi Hancock went over into at the Central Valley, San Joaquin Valley, and went up that way. And then another group went south and basically up the Spanish Trail on up back what would today be Interstate 15. So they went different ways to get home. James Stevens Brown went with the group led by Levi Hancock. Quite a bunch of them went that way. They went up the Central Valley all the way up to Sacramento. On September the 7th, 1847, they were met by Sam Brannan and others with a message from Brigham Young saying, "Don't come. We don't have any way to support you unless you have family already in the valley. Stay and come on the next year." Well, because of that, a number of the men remained in California until the following season. Some of the men, about half of the men, kept going east, but James Brown and others turned back to seek employment for the winter. Well, James and 5 other men, Henry Bigler and Azariah Smith and others, gained employment, of course, working for John Sutter, building a sawmill on the American River. We were just there. And for the first time, got to walk around and see that replica of the mill and the mill race that's still there where the gold was found. On the 24th of January, 1848, the foreman of the project, James Marshall, found gold in the mill race. Now I can forever, in my mind, every time I hear that, picture that mill race where it was found. Well, that discovery sparked the gold rush, of course, of 1849. And it was Latter-day Saints who printed it and carried the newspapers east to announce the gold rush on the East Coast. And it is estimated that tens of billions of dollars of gold was found. And in the ensuing aftermath of that rush, some 300,000 to 400,000 people rushed to California to claim it. But before all those Easterners came, and before the Argonauts came, the 49ers, James Brown and the Mormon Battalion brethren were there first boots on the ground, and found the gold everywhere. As summer approached, the battalion veterans were faced with a big decision. Should they stay and make a fortune in gold, or leave it all behind and return to their families and their faith? James Stevens Brown wrote this: "The day before starting from the gold diggings was kind of an off day. I wandered off from the camp with a pick and shovel up a dry gulch where I soon struck a very rich prospect of gold. By sundown, I'd washed out $49.50 in gold. Yet, strange as it may appear, I have never seen that rich spot of earth since, nor do I regret it. For there's always been a higher object before me than gold. We had covenanted to move together. We were honor bound to move the next day. We did move, leaving that rich prospect without ever sticking a stake in the gulch, but abandoning it to those who might follow. People said, "Here is gold on the bedrock, gold on the hills, gold in the rills, gold everywhere, gold to spend, gold to lend, gold for all that will delve, and soon you can make an independent fortune." We could realize all that, Henry said. Still, duty called. Our honor was at stake. We had covenanted with each other. There was a principle involved, for with us, it was God and his kingdom first. We had friends and relatives in the wilderness, yea, in an untried desert land, and who knew their condition? We did not. So it was our duty before pleasure, before wealth, and with this prompting, we rolled out and joined our comrades. End of quote. Oh, that is powerful. Imagine if that same sense of responsibility, duty, covenant was in the heart of every Latter-day Saint now. Do we have a higher object in view than wealth, power, pleasure, ease, and convenience? I think some of you do. By the time the battalion got to San Diego, after men had fallen out and were sick, after they'd made it across the Anza Borrego, the deserts of California and Arizona, there were approximately 330 battalion members left. There were a little give or take, but there were 4 women that made it into the valley. One of those was Melissa Burton. She was born March 2nd, 1828 in Ontario, Canada. When she was 10 years old, she was baptized a member of the church. And when the saints left Nauvoo in 1846, Melissa Burton was among them. On June 2nd, 1846, at Mount Pisgah, Iowa, Melissa married William Coray. She was 18. Days later, when the call came to join the battalion and fight for the United States, William volunteered, but Melissa saw no reason why she needs to stay behind. If he must go, I want to go, she said. Why must women always stay behind and worry about their husbands when they could just as well march beside them, she said. Well, leaving her family was difficult, but she felt her duty was to her husband, and indeed it was. She never saw her mother in this life again. Her mother passed away and was buried along the Missouri River later that year. Melissa worked as a laundress for Company B. She departed Council Bluffs along with the rest, marched to Fort Leavenworth, and from there went on to Santa Fe, and from Santa Fe across New Mexico, Arizona, and the Imperial Desert of California, building as they went. They weren't just walking, they were working. Building as they went a wagon road of more than 1,000 miles across the desert. It was an unspeakably grueling march and a lot of work. On one of the places I take you on this tour is called Box Canyon, where the battalion literally had to cut a road through living rock to get through. On a number of occasions on that march, those too weak and sick were dismissed from the ranks. But Melissa went on all the way to Mission San Luis Rey. I didn't mind it, she said. I walked because I wanted to. My husband had to walk, and I went along by his side. The country through which they journeyed was formidable and dangerous because of lack of water, lack of food, etc. So in order to survive, Melissa very carefully rationed their food and would carry a stone in her mouth to lessen her thirst. Somewhere in Arizona, Melissa learned that she was expecting, and from that time on, did everything she could to hide her pregnancy and the nausea that relentlessly accompanied it. You imagine? Finally, in January of 1847, the exhausted members of the battalion reached the shores of the Pacific. As one soldier quipped, they came in not with flags flying, but with rags flying. Their commanding officer, a tough, hardened West Point veteran, Colonel Philip St. George Cook, praised them, saying, "History may be searched in vain for an equal march of infantry." End of quote. Well, once in California, Melissa and William served with Company B in San Diego, headquartered on Presidio Hill. After their discharge in July 47, Melissa and her husband went north with a new wagon and a team of horses. They went with Jefferson Hunt up the coast road. It was at Monterey, October 2nd, 1847, that Melissa gave birth to her first son, William Coray Jr. He died a few days after his birth. Melissa and William kept going. They fell in with the Browett Homes Company. Now, this is now up near the Sierra Nevadas, about 40 miles east and south of Sutter's Mill. They fell in with a company that was going to go home. This is 48, and they were going to cut a new road over Carson Pass to do it. Well, they did. They succeeded. Now, that's where Tragedy Spring is, but they succeeded in making that road, and it would become the principal route of the 49ers coming into the gold fields of California. More than 200,000 would come over that road that Melissa and her cohorts would make over that pass. Of her arrival into the Salt Lake Valley in December 1848, 2.5 years after leaving Council Bluffs, Melissa said, quote, "We were glad to get here, I can tell you. This was the promised land she dreamed of, but it was not anything of a land of ease and comfort. The winter of 48 and 49 was cold. On the morning of February the 6th, 1849, at minus 30-degree temperatures, Melissa gave birth to her second child, a little girl that they named Melissa. Their joy was short-lived, however, as this time her husband, Captain William Coray, died on March 7th from consumption, starvation, and exposure. Melissa would go on. She would marry William H. Kimball and bear 7 more children. This woman, tough of faith, tender of heart, followed her husband and the prophets more than 3,000 miles to the Salt Lake Valley. In praise and honor, her family declared Melissa to be, quote, true as steel to her convictions. In 1994, the state of California memorialized that pioneer woman, her courage and sacrifice, by naming a mountain peak after her not too far from the Carson Pass Road that she helped make, Melissa Coray Peak. We saw it, snow-capped, in the Sierra Nevada. Guys, you and I may not get a mountain named after us for being tough, faithful, and obedient to the very end. But if we are as true as steel to our convictions, I promise you, heaven's going to remember. They will memorialize our sacrifices. And I don't care for mountains named after me, as long as I am lifted up to stand with the Lord on the great day of his coming on that heavenly mount. Last story. Okay, so in summary, June 26, 1846, Captain James Allen, when a small detachment of soldiers from the United States Army approached the Latter-day Saint settlement of Mount Pisgah in Iowa Territory with orders to recruit and take into service 500 Latter-day Saint men to form a battalion, regular army, and march off to California to join up with the country's war with Mexico. They were not well received at Pisgah. Wilford Woodruff said of that visit, "I had some reason to believe them to be spies." George Albert Smith said, "For the government to make such a demand when we were driven from our homes and possessions and were scattered upon the plains from Nauvoo to the Missouri River was, quote, more cruel than the grave." Daniel Barry Rawson said, no relative, "I felt indignant toward the government that had suffered me to be raided and driven from my home. I made the uncouth remark that I would see them all damned and in hell, and I would not enlist." End of quote. So the battalion started out on a rocky foundation. However, Brigham Young had a different vision. He saw that this was, quote, for our good and comes from above, he said. And with that encouragement, men stepped forward and signed up, but it was hard. William Hyde said, "When the news of the call came, I looked upon my family and then upon my aged parents, and the situation of the camps in the midst of an uncultivated and wild country, and my soul revolted," he said. "But when I came to learn the mind of the Lord, and on learning the offering had to be made, I said," and I love this, "Here am I. Take me." Well, like William, the men came forward and the billets were filled. On July 20th, they began to depart. Zadok Knapp Judd said, "This was quite a hard pill to swallow, to leave wives and children on the wild prairie, destitute and almost helpless. But the word came from the right source and seemed to bring the spirit of conviction of its truth with it." William Hyde again described leaving his family behind. The thoughts of leaving them at this critical time are indescribable. Nevertheless, William and all the others left winter quarters, left the Missouri, bound for California. The rigors and sufferings of those who made that march are impossible to adequately describe. Words won't do it, and much less to comprehend by modern readers. You have to go, you have to see, and you have to feel. Yet the battalion, through it all, was successful. Indeed, more successful than even they would know in this life. They were discharged in July 47 in Los Angeles and made their way east, searching for their families that they knew not where. Their families could be over 1,300 miles of road, and they didn't know where. The contributions of the Mormon Battalion are as many and as varied as the historians who interpret and summarize their story, including me. Nevertheless, of all that could be said about the contribution of the battalion, or should be said, this entry from the diary of Reddick Newton Allred says it all. He wrote, quote, "December 19th, 1847, I crossed the Missouri River and went 8 miles to Little Pigeon, Allred's settlement, where I found my wife and daughter living with father, all well and overjoyed at the safe return of their soldier boy and husband. After we rested a while, President Young proclaimed a jubilee in the log tabernacle at Canesville and invited the returned soldiers. As Brother William Hyde and I were approaching, President Young said to President Kimball and others, pointing to us, these men were the salvation of this church. End of quote. And so they were. My dear friends, if you ever get the opportunity to go and see and experience for yourself where the Mormon Battalion marched, the service they rendered, the memorials they left, please do so. Visit that center in San Diego. In fact, two of the people that were on our tour just yesterday, Jeff and Liz Sly, are going there to serve as missionaries later this year. If you hurry up, you can meet them down there. Brothers and sisters, from this day forward, when you and I are called upon to do hard things, I hope and pray we will remember the battalion, the pioneers in general, and remember that we're going to see them in the next life. I hope we can do hard things too. Now, in closing, one more time, thank you for listening tonight. Please share this with everyone and anyone who might need to hear it. Thank you to all those of you who are the free subscribers to my stories. Thank you to the VIPs, everyone who is financially supporting this work. I am grateful. And with that,